anonymously, and you can go. You can go on the Wi-Fi. You can just log in here. You enter polev.com/SMSV018, and then you can write your question. Or you can also text it, but there's a limit on the number of characters if you're going to text. But you can text to 37607. So this is the 2. You're sending it to that number. And in the body of the text, you're going to put SMSV018 and then write your question. I will receive these questions anonymously. We're going to go through the talk. And then we have a few questions that would be discussed in each group for a few minutes. And then at the end, we'll have time to answer all the questions. And you can also ask questions in the microphone, and if you feel that this question could be of benefit for the entire group. So please keep that in mind as we begin our series. So welcome to our new series. It's entitled Comparative Theology. Let's talk religion. And this is indeed a hot topic today. Everyone is talking about religion. We live in a very diverse culture where every person you meet is probably of a different religion, and even if the same religion, they're of different denomination. And even if they claim that they don't have any religion, then as we're going to discuss later on, then they also have their own set of beliefs. Let's begin by looking at the entire series. And this is a 7-week series with just a little break in the middle. So it is going to take us 8 weeks, but actually it's a 7-week series. So tonight, Lord willing, we're going to start with a general question and an introduction to religion. And we called it, Who Needs Religion Anyways? And again, it's the idea here is to just dive deep into the topic and try to look at it from many different perspectives as the idea or the concept of religion exists in our postmodern world or the 21st century. After this introduction, Lord willing, next week we're going to start with some of the major religions around the world. And I know that we'll probably need a part 2 to this series because we're not covering all of the religions, but just the major ones for now. And also, we're not going to dive deeper into the denominations. We're just going to be speaking very generally about these religions, giving an introduction, as well as trying to understand how people of this religion feel or believe or practice their faith. But also, it's really important for us to also understand what kinds of questions do they ask about Christianity, and what kind of misconceptions they have about us, and also we may have about them. And hopefully we can also speak about how do we reach out to people of different religions with the message of Christ and the message of salvation. So next week, Lord willing, we'll be speaking about Christianity. September 25th is going to be Judaism, and then October the 2nd will be Islam. October the 9th is immediately after the Thanksgiving long weekend, so we said it's going to be a little bit of a break. I don't know, all the turkey and gravy and stuffing, so everyone will be very stuffed. So we're still going to try to figure out what's going to be the schedule on that day, but it's not going to be the series anyways, and we'll see. We'll let you know about the program. Then October 16th, we come back, and we'll speak about Buddhism, Hinduism, and then finally October 30th will be New Age and Humanism. Father Thomas will be covering 2 of these 7 topics, and Lord willing, I'll be covering the other 5. Now, as I'm used to in any academic initiative, and I learned this through my journey in school and higher education, that before actually we speak about the topic, we have to think about our own biases. And no matter what you hear in the news, no matter what topic you hear in the church or in politics, we always have to think about the speaker's biases, because there's always a worldview that this person is coming from and is representing. And as much as we want to be as neutral as possible, we still have to admit to our own biases. So, of course, I have to give you a heads up that this is series from a Christian perspective, looking at other religions, and people of different faith or beliefs may not exactly agree with everything that we're going to be discussing here, but that's just the nature of who I am as a person, my set of beliefs and convictions in life. So that's why it might be a bit difficult to remain objective in all subjects due to these personal beliefs and convictions. Also, the other bias that we might face is that we don't necessarily have people who belong to these faith or communities who are able to respond to everything that we discuss in this series. And that puts also some people at a disadvantage, because it's not a debate, it's not a place where people make certain claims and other people respond back to them by saying, well, I disagree with you because such and such. So again, this is also something we have to keep in mind, that at the end of the day, most of my resources are going to be Christian resources. It's not entirely, of course, but again, we're looking at other religions, other beliefs, other faiths from that Christian worldview that we're coming from as a Coptic Orthodox church. And then finally, what I can assure you of, that we're not going to take these topics in a sarcastic manner or trying to take cheap shots at other faiths or religions, as was the case many years ago and some decades ago, where every religion wanted to see its superiority towards other religions, so they took cheap shots. But we want as much as possible to present the facts based on what other religions believe about themselves, but also have the liberty to counter that or to respond to that from our own perspective, whether we agree on some things. And I'm sure there will be things that we can agree upon, but also there will be things that we disagree upon. So we'll try to look this with the utmost respect and a thoughtful academic manner. And please feel free to call me out if I ever try to take a cheap shot at anyone, because that's not the intention at all. I think we live in a generation now that understands that the bottom line, the minimum we have to do as human beings is just to respect one another and to enter into a meaningful dialogue. Doesn't mean that we agree on everything together, but at least the manner of discussion has to be in a very respectful way towards one another. Let's begin with the topic of religion. Let's try to define religion as much as we can. The word religion actually is a complicated word, and you might be surprised that it does not appear at all in the Hebrew Bible, neither does it appear in any Aramaic writings. The word religion actually comes from the Latin religio, meaning reverence for God, or by extension, if we're going to expand the definition of religion towards other religions or faith systems that do not believe in God, so towards God or the gods. It's the careful pondering of divine things, or also piety. So it involves two ways. My own perspective as a human being towards the deity that I believe in, the higher deity, whether that is, let's keep it very general, but also it concerns a whole set of beliefs towards humanity, how we deal with one another. So morality and human piety. Religion is often used to refer to systems of beliefs. So, I mean, you cannot be called a religion if you are a cult or a small set of, a group of people who act in a certain way or have certain beliefs. So we're speaking about major religions. We cannot refer to, a tiny little group of people who live in a home here or in a town there, as a religion. So we're going to refer to religion as, for now, the major religions of the world that have a lot of followers who attest or pertain to that way of living. So it's also related to practices that play equivalent role in people's lives. So it's not something that people kind of marginalize or think lightly of. It's more or less people who see themselves as part of that faith community, or they find even their livelihood as taking the commandments and the writings and the worldview of this religion very seriously towards the way that they conduct and live their life. In the Greek language, there are 3 words that are translated into religion in the English language. So these 3 words are diamonia, trisykia, and eusebia. So all these 3 words are more or less translated in the New Testament as the word religion. But what they are really referencing are to show reverence to a higher deity, to show respect, to show worship, and also discipline of the divine. Furthermore, religions have to center around a worldview of their understanding of the divine or God or Okay, we're back. So religions have usually a common God or gods, and all members of that community kind of gather around that deity, and it unites them in their rites, their practices, their customs. Most probably this worshiping community come together around certain belief systems, but also the practice of like either a liturgical practice or an organized form of showing adoration to that deity or God. So furthermore, besides that community understanding of the God or the deity, they also have opinions about civil matters like marriage, like holding of property, for example, government of the community, our understanding or their understanding of life and death and what happens after death. So it goes more into also an anthropological perspective of how people communicate and live together and have a better understanding of life and also what happens after death. Now, this is from a very secular or broad perspective, but also from a Christian perspective, there are some early church fathers who wrote about that adoration or commitment towards God or towards our own deity as Christians. So, for example, Lucius Lactantius, he was one of the teachers around the time of Constantine, the righteous king Emperor Constantine, and also he was a teacher of his son in Christianity. He said that religion is the attachment to God by the bond of piety. So it's really important to understand that our hearts are connected with God. So if we're speaking about, our God or the Christian God, but piety is also, again, the adoration, the praise, the worship, the rites that connect us together with that God. One of the contemporary writers, and his German, his name I can hardly pronounce, Schleiermacher, okay, maybe you can do a better pronunciation. He said, religion is the absolute dependence on God. It's a free act of our will, not a fate which we suffer passively. So it's a commitment with our own personal free will towards that deity, so towards God. And it is our pleasure to commit our life to the one that we understand is greater and higher than all. And of course, the famous quote by St. Augustine, who said in his book Confessions, and I quote that saying very often, "You have created us for yourself, therefore our hearts are restless until they find rest in you." So what he's trying to say is that there's a lot of search, back in the day, whether it's in the 4th, 5th centuries or the 21st century, everyone is seeking and they're looking and they're trying to find a meaning to life. There's a search for the truth, as we're going to mention now, and no one finds true rest until they can find rest and confidence and love and a relationship with the one that they love. Furthermore, some of the authors who were pondering upon the true understanding of meaning of religion, they said that it has been a desire of all of humanity since the beginning of time to search for two things: truth and goodness. These are the two things that kind of unite all the people who have ever thought about a deity, a God, someone to worship in this world or out of the world or out of the universe. So he said the following. His name is Otto Leidrer. I can't remember, it's probably another German name. And he wrote a book called Religion and Historic Faith. He said, truth is the climax of theoretical reason. So all the intelligent people, the philosophers, the people who are thinkers, their ultimate goal is always to reach truth, to find the truth. So that theoretical reason ultimately is climaxed in finding the truth. Reason, striving for unity, does not rest content until all particular purposes are subordinated to one highest. So the higher that they are thinking, the more intelligent, the more intellectual that they become, the more belittled that they feel that they have not reached anywhere. And there is much more to be known about the world, the universe, our existence. Just like you enter into the ocean, and as far as you can go in with your boat, you can never reach its ends because it's so vast and amazing. So at some time, we come to the conclusion that there is something that is eternal, something that is unlimited, beyond any understanding. Like as St. John wrote in his gospel, that he thinks that if this whole world was filled with books, then it would not be enough to tell about the amazing things of God, of that deity who exists. So there's a search for the truth, but there's also the idea of the good. Because at the end of the day, as human beings, what we aspire for is goodness. At the foundation of any interaction, I think this is also something that all of religions, or most of the religions, at least from their own perspective, they are seeking truth and goodness as a means to reach, a kind of an elevated mindset. He continues by saying, will it be possible for reason to rest satisfied? Definitely with this dualism of highest ideas, the idea of the true and the idea of the good. So what he's basically saying is that there's no way that the human mind of reason, of logic, will ever rest until it finds these two things, truth and goodness. And the more you enter into them, you understand that there is a higher being in this universe that kind of calls you, that has organized, that has put everything together. And more, as we learn about our universe, about the planet we live on, the more understanding we have of the vastness of this order, of this creation, of the amazing intellectual understanding of everything that exists around us. There's also another argument that says that at the end of the day, everyone believes in something. Like you can say, I'm a believer, and others says, I'm not a believer. But if you claim that you're not a believer of something, you're basically saying that I'm a believer of something else. And this is how I make decisions, and this is how I live my life based on these sets of beliefs. Philip Johnson said, one who claims to be a skeptic of one set of beliefs is actually a true believer in another set of beliefs. Furthermore, our beliefs determine our worldview, how we live our lives, make decisions, and ultimately determine our destiny. In the book entitled, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, and there are 3 books that I actually recommend for this series. This one, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, by Geisler and Turek. It's an excellent book. Another one here is called Jesus Among Other Gods by Ravi Zacharias. And then the third one is Jesus Among Secular Gods, the countercultural claims of Christ. So if you feel that you would like to acquire any of these books, please speak with Nermeen, and she will be able to order, so you know how many you like to order, instead of ordering and not having enough or having more than we need. So a part of his argument here, he says that religion answers questions that all humanity are actually looking for. Everyone is looking to seek an answer about these questions. Number one being the origin. Where did we come from? So, for example, Christians or other monotheistic religions would believe that there is a deity, a God, who created heavens and earth, and the beginning of everything came from him. Other religions don't believe that there is a beginning to the world. So there are 2 perspectives. So again, depending on which religion I belong to or ascribe to, that answers that question. Number 2, identity. Who are we? Why are we here? Why are we even on earth? Is there a purpose other than being born, living, suffering for a bit, and then finally dying? So in that sense of identity, who am I in my own perspective, but also in the perspective of others? And also, besides who are we, it is why are we here, and finding meaning to my existence on earth. Number 4 is the morality. How should I live my life based on the set of beliefs that I have acquired or understand to be the truth about my existence? And then finally, what is my destiny? Where are we going? What happens after leaving this earth? Is there eternal life? Is it just nihilism? Nihilism is just basically when you cease to exist, like there's no soul, no spirit, and nothing to look forward for in the age which is to come. Now, as we enter into this study of religion or religions, we will categorize all religions of the world, and this might be too naive from us to kind of, categorize everything that exists into the world into like simple 4 points. But for the sake of this study, we're going to take that approach, that there are more or less 4 perspectives towards religion that exists in the world. I'm sure people can argue there's a lot more, but let's just start with these 4, and then from there we can expand maybe later. Number 1, it is the theistic or monotheistic perspective. And if we want to remember just something to remind us of the category of each one of these worldviews about religions, we're going to say that monotheism or theism, the word theos in Greek means God. So mono is one, theos or theistic is one God. So the perspective that there is a God and that God is one. You can remember it by remembering the phrase God made all. So there's one being who exists outside of the realm of time, who's in control, who has created time, and he has his fingerprints in each and every creature, creation, and we have the ability to connect with him. He is a real being who feels, who understands, we can communicate with, he can communicate back with us in the form of prayer towards him, and then also prophecy and inspiration. He speaks back to holy men and women of God who wrote the Holy Scriptures, and also at certain times he may appear to certain human beings to give them messages, and there is a reality to the whole understanding of he's a miraculous being. Like he's outside of human logic. He does things that we cannot always comprehend or understand because his knowledge is very vast and more than any human being could grasp. So monotheism, God made all, and we can look at three major world religions, being Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Of course, within these three religions, there are many differences in terms of our understanding of who that deity is. That's true. But at least the bottom line, all three major world religions, some people argue against it. Of course, there are always people who oppose, but let's just stay with what everyone kind of agrees with at this time. The second category are the religions that believe in pantheism, or sometimes also called polytheism, polytheistic. So pan means what? You know, when you take a panoramic kind of picture or view, it means what? So the idea of pantheism is that God is all. And the concept of God being all, it means that there is no higher being that I can have a relationship outside of this temporal world. But God or the God could be anything. It could be me and you, or we are all gods or part of that Godhead. The table, the animals, the creation. And this perspective or worldview is in Zen Buddhism, Hinduism, and also in New Age, in some of the New Age religions that's going to be discussed in detail at the tail end of this series. So, what do we mean that God is me and God is in you? So how many of you are fans of Star Wars? Star Wars? No? Just one? Two? Star Wars. What's the most three, four? What's the most famous phrase of Star Wars? May the Force be with you, right? What is that force? Huh? Like a light or you know what? The force, and we will go in more detail later. But that force, okay, which is, let's say, like electricity. Electricity could be used for good or bad. So people who use the force in a good way, they turn out, the force would kind of help them to do good things. Those who abuse the force, then, it ends up hurting them. This whole series is centered around, that Zen Buddhist perspective of the force, or, and so we have to be careful now when someone uses the word God. What do you mean exactly about God? Because you could be referring to the God of the monotheistic religion, or are we referring to the force as God? So the force is not something that is personable. You cannot pray to the force. Do you know what I mean? The force will not speak to you. You can use it. It's a tool. Just like you use electricity or fire. With fire, you can cook a meal, you can create things and do wonderful things. But with fire also, you can burn buildings and hurt people, etc. With electricity, you can do the same. With water, you can do the same. You need water to survive, to drink it, right? Or you can drown in water and it can kill you. That's the whole concept of the force, or God is all. Anything I can use for good or I can use it for evil, and it contains that divine. So, pantheism, God is all. And then the third world perspective is atheism. So A means not, and then theism is God. So there is no God. It's not out there, he's not me. You guys are all a bunch of crazy people, and you imagine things, and you're all on weed, and you smoke this, and you guys are all crazy. Forget about all this God talk, and just don't mention it, don't bring it up. You and I, we can be good together. We'll do nice things to each other. And the bottom line is that we might have some things in common, some principles. Do good unto others as you want them to do good unto you. And this is the new perspective, what we call now religious humanism, or sometimes called secular humanism. Or some people who are atheists, they may say, I don't prescribe to any religion at all, it doesn't matter. But as we mentioned earlier, the bottom line, they still prescribe to a religion that says there is no God, right? Remember that quote we said earlier about everyone prescribes to something. Okay, even if they say I'm not a religious person, they still prescribe to a whole set of beliefs. So they have to define their own belief system, and it is that there is no God. The final category, which is kind of not a very, I don't want to use any words that could be harmful to anyone, but it's the lazy person's approach. It's like the person who doesn't really want to give it enough time or effort to answer the most important question in life. Is there a God or no God? Are there many gods or just one? So they end up saying, I'm an agnostic. Word agnostic, so Gnosticism means knowledge. So agnostic means no knowledge. So they say, I don't know. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Religion anyways created a lot of hurt in the past and wars, and people killed each other. A lot of fanatic people kind of butt heads together. Look at this religion, fighting with that religion. They're probably wrong. Is there a God? Maybe, maybe yes, maybe no. And probably most of the people who are agnostic, they were something in the past, but they got hurt. So let's say someone was a Christian, and they saw a lot of problems happening with the Crusades, or, this church going and abusing children, or these clergy, or personal experiences. And in their mind, they are saying, if there is a God, there is no way that all of these atrocities are happening. So there's a hurt. They prayed. Maybe their parents were sick, and they were praying for them that God would answer, and the parent wasn't healed. So you end up saying, I'm having a hard time anyways believing in a God when I prayed to him and he never healed my mom, or he left all of these bad things happening in the world. So they either turn and become atheists, or they call themselves atheists just because they've been hurt, or they call themselves agnostic. Maybe there's a God, but it doesn't really matter. Like, I'm not really interested anymore to pursue a relationship with God if he existed. So they just call themselves agnostic. We're not going to enter into a lot of details today, just giving you highlights so that you would have the bigger picture, and then, God willing, as the series progresses, we're going to go into a bit more detail. As we know now the four major claims about religions, we come to the question, are all claims true? Some people today in our world say the claim that religion is only a matter of faith. They just say, whatever you believe in, truth is in the eyes of the beholder, just like beauty. Like, whatever you believe in is fine. That's your own truth. Or they give the analogy of the four blind people with the elephant, which I really don't like, because they're really insulting blind people. I don't like that. Blind people, or people who are visually impaired, they know a lot more than to miss out on the elephant, to think, oh, this is a sphere, this is a trunk, this is a wall, whatever it is. I meet a lot of people who are visually impaired, and from my voice, they know who I am, and they can call me out, and they say this, and that. So anyhow, that whole analogy, because it makes sense to some people, that anyways, there is one concept of God, and everyone looks differently upon that God, or maybe there's no God and just construction of the imagination. So that whole understanding is actually a modern day myth that we shouldn't buy into. The bottom line is that the whole concept of faith and religion is, in my opinion, not just mine, but many people would agree, it's the most important question that we have to answer in our life. And we can't just shove it off so slightly to say, well, maybe this, maybe that, this and that, it doesn't matter. No, it does matter, because based upon the answer of this question, I will live my life, I conduct myself and make decisions and spend my time and all of these things. If there are two contradicting claims, they cannot be true. Like, you cannot be here and not here at the same time. You're either here or you're not here, right? You either, this universe that we live in, either it had a beginning or it did not have a beginning. Either there is a God or there is no God, but all of these things cannot mesh together, and, it becomes something of the construction of the mind. What about the claim for monotheism? So we understood now all of the claims, and we're just going to give a brief introduction about monotheism. Now, in many people's mind, those who are theists, okay, again, people who are not theists or atheists or agnostic or pantheists, they would have different perspectives. But from our perspective as theists or monotheists, we say that monotheism was the original religion, because our scripture claims that from the beginning, God revealed himself to his creation. So this is at the utmost beginning. From the very page of the book of Genesis, in the beginning, God created. And God, the creator, revealed himself to the humans, and he revealed himself to them. He spoke to them, communicated with them, and we read the rest of the story until the end of times. There was never a time of the human history when we were without a religion. And the religion here again ascribed as a relationship between the creator and the created. God's revelation to humans was immediate, it was direct, and carried conviction. There were commandments and instructions on what to do and when to do it and how to do it. And humans responded and made that covenant with God to be in a relationship with him and to understand him as the creator, as the source, as the beginning, as the protector, and us, his children, as guarded and guided by this relationship. Also, furthermore, we understand monotheism has been revealed from the beginning, and this is a quote in the book called An Introduction to History of Religion by Frank Byron Javons. He said, monotheism has been revealed from the beginning. It cannot have been reached by process of development, because sometimes we say religion needs to develop, and the primitive man believed in this and believed in that, and then ultimately we reached where we are today. But he's saying, no, it couldn't have been done in a progression or development. It cannot have been reached by process of development. Anything different must have been parting from truth of revealed religion. Only evolution of error. So this is like a scientific concept that, you know, if you have something really good, it can only deteriorate. It cannot actually progress. Like, let's say you have an apple or a banana and you leave it on the counter. After a few days, you start to see that it's disintegrating, right? So it gets worse, not better. Like, you cannot see something that is disintegrating, and then by that natural process, all of a sudden, it's becoming ripe and happy. So he's saying the whole concept of monotheism is the origin, it's the original. And then after that, the distortion of the mind is what kind of created everything else, because of that decreased relationship with the living God. Today, of course, we celebrate the feast of the Coptic New Year, Nowruz, the feast of Nowruz. So in this feast, we celebrate the feast of the martyrs. So I want to share with you something small, that one of the very early Christian martyrs, actually he was a hero of the 2nd century. He was an apologist, someone who defended the Christian faith. His name is St. Justin Martyr, or St. Justin the Martyr. And he was heavily involved in philosophy, Platonism and Socratism and all of the different Greek philosophies and philosophers. And when he got introduced to the Christian faith, he came up with a fairly nice understanding of religion and faith. He said, when I was a disciple of Plato, hearing the accusations made against the Christians and seeing them intrepid in the face of death and of all that men fear, so when they came face to face with death, everyone else would be so afraid and fearful except for the Christians. I said to myself that it was impossible that they should be living in evil and in the love of pleasure, because they had died to the world. They need nothing from this world. All their focus is on the heavenly kingdom and the age which is to come. Christians prefer truth to life. They prefer to choose the truth. So they had been shown or revealed to the truth about the existence of God, that there is that one God, that makes them desire to be with him in the age which is to come. And this is a very interesting observation. He said, nobody died for the teaching of Socrates. No one offered their life for the sake of all of these philosophies. But there's something very special about the Christians who were able to understand that life after death is imminent, and it is worth it to offer their lives for the sake of the one that they believe in. I just want to conclude by giving you a very brief introduction about postmodernism. Postmodernism. So this is something that more or less started, every age, every era had its own title. There was like the scholastics, there was the Enlightenment, there was modernism. Now we're in an age called postmodern. Post means after, modern. What came after modernity? Maybe the last 20 years of the last century and the first few couple of decades now in the 21st century. What is the postmodern worldview? More or less, it is relativism. Everything is relative. There is no absolute truth. There's anything goes, everything goes, and nothing goes. So you cannot say anything for sure. Like even if you say, I have in my hand a book and it's called Jesus Among Other Gods, you have someone who says to you, how can you be sure that this is a book? Maybe it's just a cover that says this and then. Okay, this, maybe this is a cat. It's not really a book. Like, there is no guarantee. So anything goes, everything goes, and nothing goes. I mean, it's not as simple as what I'm referring to, but I think you get the idea that everything is relative and nothing is cast in concrete. The whole idea, as Jean Lyotard explains it, he says, requires a suspicion of the overarching story. So everything that has been set as standard in the past, now it's time to doubt it and to cast new perspectives on it. Usually these perspectives are of those who had been marginalized in the past, or were not in the center of attention, or did not have any power in the past. It's basically giving power to the powerless. And those who had no voice or persecuted in the past, they're the ones who should be given access to give new world perspectives on things. They're also called meta-narratives, other narratives for the same story, that support our claims of truth. Any claim to know truth or any attempt to commend truth to others is likely to be just a power play. Like, I want to convince you that Christianity is the way that we should live our lives. You're basically, or people who think in that perspective, you just probably want to collect money, you want power, you want people to follow you blindly. Why aren't you giving people a way to think for themselves? So again, it's a meta-narrative that puts suspicion in everything that was appeared as standard in the past. So it's a power play. They argue and attempt to impose one's own meta-narrative in the guise of an absolute truth. So postmodernism is a reality of our world. We can't escape from it. And we have to deal with it face to face. Like, it would be a detrimental decision for the church today to say or to pretend that these worldviews don't exist, or that Christianity now appeals to everyone as the only way to live our lives. People have options. But in the same manner, in the same logical dialogue and perspectives, you and I are obliged to put in an effort to understand. Because again, as we mentioned earlier, this is the most important topic that we should be dealing with. And we should settle this question down once and for all. Because once I'm convinced, I'm going to make decisions in my life that are going to depend on how I live my life, how I conduct myself, what kind of morals, values do I have, what kind of belief system. And if I know that the commodity that I have in my hand is worthwhile, I might be able to share it with others, not to shove it down their throat. Again, that time is gone, and thank God that it's gone, because people now are very smart, very intellectual. They're able to think about things, rationalize things. And again, when we think that we're living in a postmodern world, this is the overarching ideology of people, but it doesn't mean that every single person now doesn't care about the truth. As a matter of fact, I feel and I believe that a lot of people are searching for the truth. And hopefully this is what we're going to be exploring in the next few weeks to understand more about faith, about religion, about practice of that faith, and indeed, hopefully reach the conclusion that there is a caring God who wants to be in a relationship with us. And glory be to God forever and ever. Amen. Now, we're going to have some table discussions. And there are 4 questions. They are up here on the screen that you can discuss. We'll try to divide the time so we're not too late. You have 15 minutes. We kind of discuss the topic and what we mentioned today. And then the last 15 minutes we'll spend answering questions. You can send in your question by logging into this site, paulev.com/SMSV018. You're gonna receive that question anonymously, or you can text it to 37607, and in the body of the text write SMSV018, and then write your text. But if it's a text, please make it a very short question because it will cut off the question if it's more than 140 characters, I believe. Otherwise, we're gonna move right into the table discussions. Please feel free. The hosts have the questions, and we'll get together again at the end to answer any questions that came about in the tables or the ones that have been sent on the site provided or the link provided. Thank you.